You ever have this thought, why the hell am I on YouTube? I was thinking about this today, of how strange it feels to be on like opposite sides of the same coin, being on the consumer side, being very excited to watch videos and to find new stuff and to share, and then fear and senselessness of being on the other side, of trying to like make YouTube videos, trying to script them, trying to just concept ideas. Why is it so exciting on one hand and almost kind of scary on the other? So if you're like me, you probably spend a lot of time on YouTube. With that comes our love and appreciation of YouTube. We feel all those things consuming content. But then when we think of like making stuff, it seems like it's the opposite. So also when I'm just scrolling on YouTube, most of the time I don't even know what I'm looking for, but I'll know when I see it. And when something interesting does catch our eye, we try it. Now, none of that seems to exist for the other side. We're trying to make videos. I feel like I'm very hesitant. I feel like I'm very slow, very calculated, very deliberate. There's not that same sense of spontaneity that I'd have just scrolling through and just giving a random video a try. And I'm so intuitive, you know, when we're just like going through a recommended looking for a video to watch. It's the absolute opposite, again, from the other side in trying to be creative on YouTube, where I'm scripting and I'm overthinking and I'm researching new processes and stuff. So I really wanted to just like think about all this stuff. It really bothers me how night and day it feels being on one side of watching YouTube videos and being on the other side of trying to make one. First, I think it's important to understand that YouTube changes you, whether you've noticed or not, because everything that happens to you changes you. And in a strange way, we kind of don't get to pick what we're interested in. Like if you're browsing for a video and something jumps out at you, well, did you let it jump out at you? Did it like come knocking on? Was there like a notification that said display video and then you clicked OK and now you could see the entire video title and the entire thumbnail and now it's interesting to you? That doesn't happen. That's a process that occurs like automatically. Being on the viewer side of things, half the fun is kind of just letting go, enjoying the ride and seeing what happens. Now, the irony of that whole thing is that anyone who would try and make a YouTube video is probably also a YouTube viewer, but creatively that sense of thrill in letting go, in just being able to enjoy the ride, is completely gone now that it's become a creative process. What kind of starts happening on its own, though, is that you both start to refine your tastes on the very specific things that you know that you do like, as well as just expanding your horizons in general because of the variety of subject matter you'll eventually be exposed to. Now, on the other side, though, through creating videos, you begin to develop this thing called your voice. And this is interesting because I think that on one hand, where watching videos is mostly a passive activity in refining your tastes, horizons, making videos then is an active activity to develop your voice. Now, in this case with voice, we're talking about not your voice, but really just the nature of all the things that come out of you. Content, the formatting, your interactions, your branding, all of that. So the funny thing in talking about our tastes and our voice is that a big part of those things really isn't up to us. And like I said before, we don't really get to choose what we're into. You just need to think about like where you were when you first got onto YouTube. What were you watching? What kind of stuff were you into? And what kind of stuff people were making? And how that's changed now. And you'll say that, yeah, there's a lot of factors involved, like the platform was different at the time, the internet was different at the time, you were a lot younger, there were different trends, there were different things happening around the world. And I think that's all part of what I'm trying to say. All these things are happening all at once in a way that just keeps changing what you're going to be into and what you will want to say. There's a lot that changed about YouTube that was outside of your control, and that affects your tastes in what you like to watch on YouTube, most of which was due to a thing that was outside of your control. And here we are today, perfectly fine with the way we use YouTube now and what we like about YouTube. And when we think about all the things outside of our control that's affected the changing dynamics we have with YouTube, we accept them. In most cases, people would say like that these things are just obvious, right? So it's really funny then that on the other side of things, none of this blatantly obvious stuff seems to register the same way. Where it should be obvious that the types of video you're going to make are going to change because of time and factors and things outside of your control. The things you want to say are going to change because of things outside of your control. What you said today might contradict something that you said back then, obviously because things happen in the world that are completely outside of your control, and all the things that happen in your life that are completely outside of your control that have spurred you to look certain things up on YouTube. And I know a lot of you out there are like me and have had a primitive technology phase, and kind of like think of how you feel about that today. And most of us don't really care. Like, if anything, I've come to appreciate more shirtless Indian men in the woods making underground pools. Okay, so like the consequences, if you can even call it that, of me going down an unpredicted path with my YouTube consumerism isn't really a consequence at all. And I think we need to keep that in mind too when we're making videos, that the consequences of going down one way or another because of whatever thing that's just happened to inspire you, or there's a fad you want to get onto, if there's something you want to make for the right reasons, something you're compelled to make for the wrong reasons, like, it's important to remember that these things all happen, but the more they happen, the better you can start to refine your voice. Just like how with the more weird shit you watch on YouTube, the more of an appreciation you have for the platform as a hub of all these communities. And it's the same with being creative. Like, we need to get weird. We need to go and explore the making of, weird things in weird ways, in weird styles. That's how we find our voice. I think a big step we can all take towards that is by letting go of our expectations. So here's something fun to try as a way to kind of gather evidence for ourselves that making random videos is really just as harmless as watching random videos. So think of your favorite YouTube channels who've been around for longer than a year, or just really any YouTube channel that you like that's been consistent for around a year, and go back and look at their first videos. Bet you that you'll see them making a lot of different kinds of videos. And there's a good chance that their videos back then were a lot different than their videos are now. And that's something important to keep in mind. And it's also important to reflect on that idea too. Reflect your own judgment of this person's channel for having like a shittier mic back in 2015, or having not as much motion graphics then until now, and whether or not that really matters to you as a person, whether or not that really affected what you got from the video, what you got to take away. For me, when I see these things, when I see kind of like these growing pains of a lot of my favorite channels, to me it's entirely humbling and not at all demotivating to see how good they were back then or how not good they were back then. So when I investigate the history of channels I like, it becomes very apparent to me that really anything goes. When I see so much evidence for that over and over again in the videos and the channels that I like, I'm also reminded of just how utterly useless it is to worry or overthink any sort of video making philosophy or process, because it's going to change. Another thing that's helpful, I think, will just be generally to like be more conscious, be more aware, because YouTube is sometimes kind of like a mirror, not a black mirror, more of like a rainbow fractal mirror. Everything that we like or dislike is really a reflection of something that's within us already. And this whole idea behind like just mindlessly scrolling for a video because I'll know it when I see it is based subconsciously, I think, on this idea that looking for new stuff and discovering new stuff is kind of cathartic to us, because it helps us realize another part of ourselves that we couldn't quite manifest in some way. So I think a lot of good can actually come out of just being more aware that everything we do, everything we watch or save as a playlist or comment on or dislike or flag as spam, it's an expression of something like kind of deeper in us that we're not aware of yet. And it's also kind of like an open hand to say, take me, let's see where this goes. So like the excitement and the uncertainty of watching videos is an introspection and also a curiosity for all the uncertainty in the unknown. What's really happening to me then is that when we're looking for new stuff and being an explorer on the viewer side, we're really fascinated by possibility more than we are paralyzed by an uncertainty. And I bet you know exactly what I'm going to say about the creative side of things. It's the opposite. We're more paralyzed by the uncertainty than fascinated with all the possibility to put an idea out there, or to share something, or to try communicate something. Is that really lame saying that only uncertainty is certain? You kind of hear it so many times now that it becomes a platitude and it doesn't mean anything anymore. But this is something that we can practice, you know, because we're on YouTube so much, we can treat it as an exercise of embracing uncertainty. You know, the next time we give like a really weird thumbnail a chance, we can recognize and be aware that this is me like flexing a muscle. This is me kind of doing an exercise and a workout in a sense. I'm exercising my acceptance of this uncertainty in this video and the rabbit hole I know it's gonna take me down. And I think once we get more like comfortable with that motor pattern until it becomes second nature or intuitive, I think that's going to permeate the other side. And we'll kind of understand better that when we're making something, the same rules still apply. That we're like taking a chance, but we're taking a chance because it's thrilling and it's exciting to see not only how people will be receptive to this thing, but also to see how making this thing changes us. So I'm really trying to internalize this idea that you don't need to know, just do. Because I feel like a lot of us are so disproportionately invested in knowing, especially if you're like me, we forget almost how to do. And when we lack the balance between knowing and doing theory and practice, it's almost like it's twice as bad, because we lose sight of lessons that we can take from one side that apply to the other side. We lose the connection between these two things when they're so out of sync with each other in our lives. So in a really strange way, it's almost like the course is already set for us in being a creator, because it is set in uncertainty. Because remember, we don't get to pick what we're into. I think of like some of my friends who are furries, and I know that wasn't a choice. Please tell me that wasn't a choice, guys. And I actually try and think about all my experiences I've had, both in teaching and learning both art and swimming. I need to tell you right now that from my experience, a lot of the first couple of tries, they're all test runs that don't really count. So they're like freebies. When someone's trying to learn art for the first time, they need to try. They need to make some stuff to see where they're at. They need to try a bunch of things to see their competencies, have an idea of where they want to go from there. But they need to have produced and shipped the work for there to be that judgment call from themselves or from the instructor. And you could say that like art is very lateral, but I'd say it's the same thing for swimming too, where someone has to come, try everything just so we can see where they're at. And especially for the adults class, they need to then, based off of how they feel about what they can do, they need to have a decision as to where they'd want to go from there. Because when you're older, you have a better sense of specifically what you want, and you don't need to learn it all. Definitely not in swimming. We can cut a lot of corners that way. And I'd say the same about art. As much as I support having like classically based, well-rounded training in realism for art before kind of going on a departure, it really doesn't matter, because you only have so much time, right? And you only have so much attention span and so much commitment too. But for the privilege of being able to educatedly cut corners, it first requires us to just make a bunch of stuff to get through the freebies so that we can learn and we can reassess, so that we have better benchmarks to compare off of. It's so interesting to think about that paradox of change between watching videos and making videos. You know, I always like to think that by watching more stuff, we're being more productive, it's making us a better person, but we don't feel that by actively making, we can get the same result, or we've never thought about it that way. So it's kind of like this mental trap that we've really been groomed into through like the way we learn in school or something, where somewhere in our mind we have an idea that passive watching could make us better, but active making won't make us better. And once you spell out those two things and put them side by side, it's obvious, even in all the learning and meta-learning research, that people who have experiences, who invest in their autonomy and have agency in making something, which requires them to test themselves, which requires them to have knowledge in the first place, which requires them to revise and outline an idea and to have a mental model of how to configure and structure this thing, then to have to present it and have it properly packaged for a demographic. It's basically irrefutable in like all the literature on learning and stuff that actively doing a thing to learn it will make you way better than by passively watching a thing to learn it or to improve at it. So for me, I think it's important to be aware of these three things, one of which is the certain uncertainty in the future of this platform and in all the work you do. Secondly, you need to keep making stuff to have more experiences even behind the scenes to know what you like and what you don't like in terms of creative process. But also keep making stuff because that's what best informs where you should go next by looking back at what you've made before. And lastly, remember the paradox of watching stuff to improve versus making stuff to improve, and how one side is clearly more effective, but the other side's just easier. So YouTube will change you. That's outside of our control, but that's also what we signed up for. YouTube is going to change us because everything changes us, and that's okay because that's what we signed for, so we might as well enjoy the ride.